Hello. So I'm going to read probably one more chapter, maybe two. I don't know. I'm getting really into it and then I have trouble stopping. But so this is chapter 9. "Where are ye going?" said a voice with a strong Scotch accent. I stopped and looked. The sound of the unicorns had long since died away, and my flight had brought me to open country. I saw the mountains where the unchanging sunrise lay, and in the foreground 2 or 3 pines on a little knoll with some large, smooth rocks and heather. On one of the rocks sat a very tall man, almost a giant, with a flowing beard. I had not yet looked one of the solid people in the face. Now, when I did so, I discovered that one sees them with a kind of double vision. Here was an enthroned and shining god whose ageless spirit weighed upon mine like a burden of solid gold. And yet at the very same moment, here was an old weather-beaten man, one who might have been a shepherd, such a man as tourists think simple because he is honest, and neighbors think deep for the same reason. His eyes had the far-seeing look of one who has lived long in open, solitary places, and somehow I divined the network of wrinkles which must have surrounded them before rebirth had washed him in immortality. I don't know," said I. "Ye can sit and talk with me, then," he said, making room for me on the stone. "I don't know you, sir," said I, taking my seat beside him. "My name is George," he answered, "George MacDonald." "Oh!" I cried. "Then you can tell me! You at least will not deceive me." Then, supposing that these expressions of confidence needed some explanation, I tried, trembling, to tell this man all that his writings had done for me. He's a great author. Maybe we'll read one of his books one time. I tried to tell him how a certain frosty afternoon at Leatherhead Station, when I first bought a copy of Phantastes, being then about 16 years old, had been to me what the first sight of Beatrice had been to Dante. Here begins the new life. I started to confess how long that life had delayed in the region of imagination merely, how slowly and reluctantly I had come to admit that his Christendom had more than an accidental connection with me, how hard I had tried not to see that the true name of the quality which first met me in his books is holiness. He laid his hand on mine and stopped me. "Son," he said, "your love, all love, is of inexpressible value to me, but it may save precious time." Here he suddenly looked very Scotch. "If I inform ye that I am already well acquainted with these biographical details. In fact, I have noticed that your memory misleads you in 1 or 2 particulars." I'm not good at a Scottish accent. "Oh," said I, and became still. "Ye had stated," said my teacher, "to talk of something more profitable." "Sir," said I, I'd almost forgotten it, and I have no anxiety about the answer now, though I do still have a curiosity. "It is about these ghosts. Do any of them stay? Can they stay? Is any real choice offered to them? How did they come to be here? Did ye ever hear of the refrigerium? A man with your advantages might have read of it in Prudentius, not to mention Jeremy Taylor." "The name is familiar, sir, but I'm afraid I've forgotten what it means." "It means that the damned have holidays, excursions, ye understand." "Excursions to this country?" "For those that will take them. Of course, most of the silly creatures don't. They prefer taking trips back to Earth. They go and play tricks on the poor, daft women ye call mediums. They go and try to assert their ownership of some house that once belonged to them. And then ye get what's called a haunting, or they go to spy on their children. Or literary ghosts hang about public libraries to see if anyone is still reading their books." "But if they come here, they can really stay?" "Aye. Ye'll have heard that the Emperor Trajan did." "But I don't understand. Is judgment not final? Is there really a way out of hell and into heaven?" "It depends on the way ye're using the words. If they leave that grey town behind, it will not have been hell. To any that leaves it, it is purgatory. And perhaps ye had better not call this country heaven. Not deep heaven, ye understand." Here he smiled at me. "Ye can call it the valley of the shadow of life. And yet, to those who stay here, it will have been heaven from the first. And ye can call those sad streets in the town yonder the valley of the shadow of death. But to those who remain there, they will have been hell, even from the beginning." I suppose he saw that I looked puzzled, for presently he spoke again. Son, he said, ye cannot in your present state understand eternity. When Anados looked through the door of the timeless, he brought no message back, but ye can get some likeness of it if ye say that both good and evil, when they are full grown, become retrospective. Not only this valley, but all this earthly past will have been heaven to those who are saved. Not only the twilight in that town, but their whole life on earth too, will then be seen by the damned to have been hell. That is what mortals misunderstand. They say of some temporal suffering, no future bliss can make up for it, not knowing that heaven, once attained, will work backwards and turn even that agony into a glory. And of some sinful pleasure they say, let me but have this, and I'll take the consequences, little dreaming how damnation will spread back and back into their past and contaminate the pleasures of the sin. Both processes begin even before death. The good man's past begins to change so that his forgiven sins and remembered sorrows take on the quality of heaven. The bad man's past already conforms to his badness and is filled only with dreariness. And that is why, at the end of all things, when the sun rises here and the twilight turns to blackness down there, the blessed will say, we have never lived anywhere except heaven, and the lost, we were always in hell, and both will speak truly. Is not that very hard, sir? I mean, that is the real sense of what they will say. In the actual language of the lost, the words will be different, no doubt. One will say he has always served his country right or wrong, and another that he has sacrificed everything to his art, and some that they've never been taken in, and some, thank God, they've always looked after number one, and nearly all that at least they've been true to themselves. And the saved? Aye, the saved. What happens to them is best described as the opposite of a mirage. What seemed when they entered it to be the veil of misery turns out, when they look back, to have been a well, and where present experience saw one salt desert, memory truthfully records that the pools were full of water. Then those people are right who say that heaven and hell are only states of mind? Hush, he said sternly. Do not blaspheme. Hell is a state of mind. Ye never said a truer word. And every state of mind left to itself, every shutting up of the creature within the dungeon of its own mind, is, in the end, hell. But heaven is not a state of mind. Heaven is reality itself. All that is fully real is heavenly. For all that can be shaken will be shaken, and only the unshakable remains. But there is a real choice after death? My Roman Catholic friends would be surprised, for to them souls in purgatory are already saved, and my Protestant friends would like it no better, for they'd say that the tree lies as it falls. And they're both right, maybe. Do not fash yourself with such questions. Ye cannot fully understand the relations of choice and time till you are beyond both, and ye were not brought here to study such curiosities. What concerns you is the nature of the choice itself, and that ye can watch them making. Well, sir, I said, that also needs explanation. What do they choose, these souls who go back? I have yet seen no others, and how can they choose it? Milton was right, said my teacher. The choice of every lost soul can be expressed in the words, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. There is always something they insist on keeping, even at the price of misery. There is always something they prefer to joy, that is, to reality. Ye see it easy enough in a spoiled child that would sooner miss its play and its supper than say it was sorry and be friends. Ye call it the sulks, but in adult life it has 100 fine names, Achilles' wrath and Coriolanus' grandeur, revenge and injured merit and self-respect and tragic greatness and proper pride. Then is no one lost through the undignified vices, sir? Through mere sensuality? Some are, no doubt. The sensualist, I'll allow ye, begins by pursuing a real pleasure, though a small one. His sin is the less. But the time comes on when, though the pleasure becomes less and less, and the craving fiercer and fiercer, and though he knows the joy can never come that way, yet he prefers to joy the mere fondling of unappeasable lust, and would not have it taken from him. He'd fight to the death to keep it. He'd like well to be able to scratch, but even when he can scratch no more, he'd rather itch than not. He was silent for a few minutes, and then began again. Ye'll understand. There are innumerable forms of this choice. Sometimes forms that one hardly thought of at all on earth. There was a creature came here not long ago and went back. Sir Archibald, they called him. In his earthly life, he'd been interested in nothing but survival. He'd written a whole shelf full of books about it. He began by being philosophical, but in the end he took up physical research. It grew to be his only occupation, experimenting, lecturing, running a magazine, and traveling too, digging out queer stories among Tibetans, and being initiated into brotherhoods in Central Africa. Proofs, and more proofs, and then more proofs again, were what he wanted. It drove him mad, even if he ever saw anyone taking an interest in anything else. He got into trouble during one of your wars for running up and down the country telling them not to fight because it wasted a lot of money that ought to be spent on research. Well, in good time, the poor creature died and came here, and there was no power in the universe would have prevented him staying and going on to the mountains. But do ye think that did him any good? This country was no use to him at all. Everyone here had survived already. Nobody took the least interest to the question. There was nothing more to prove. His occupation was clean gone. Of course, if he would only have admitted that he'd mistaken the means for the end, and had a good laugh at himself, he could have begun all over again, like a little child, and entered into joy. But he would not do that. He cared nothing about joy. In the end, he went away. How fantastic, said I. Do ye think so? Said the teacher with a piercing glance. It is nearer to such as you than ye think. There have been men before now who got so interested in proving the existence of God that they came to care nothing for God himself, as if the good Lord had nothing to do but exist. There have been some who were so occupied in spreading Christianity that they never gave a thought to Christ. Man, ye see it in smaller matters. Did ye ever know a lover of books that with all his first editions and signed copies had lost the power to read them? Or an organizer of charities that had lost all love for the poor? It is the subtlest of all the snares. Moved by a desire to change the subject, I asked why the solid people, since they were full of love, did not go down into hell to rescue the ghosts. Why were they content simply to meet them on the plain? One would have expected a more militant charity. Ye will understand that better perhaps before ye go, said he. In the meantime, I must tell ye, they have come further for the sake of the ghosts than ye can understand. Every one of us lives only to journey further and further into the mountains. Every one of us has interrupted that journey and retraced immeasurable distances to come down today on the mere chance of saving some ghosts. Of course, it is also joy to do so, but ye cannot blame us for that. And it would be no use to come further even if it were possible. The same would do no good if they made themselves mad to help madmen. But what of the poor ghosts who never get into the omnibus at all? Everyone who wishes does. Never fear. There are only two kinds of people. In the end, those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says in the end, thy will be done. All that are in hell choose it. Without that self-choice, there could be no hell. No soul that seriously and constantly desires joy will ever miss it. Those who seek find. To those who knock, it is opened. At this moment, we were suddenly interrupted by the thin voice of a ghost, talking at an enormous speed. Looking behind us, we saw the creature. It was addressing one of the solid people, and was doing so too busily to notice us. Every now and then, the solid spirit tried to get in a word, but without success. The ghost's talk was like this. Oh, my dear, I've had such a dreadful time. I don't know how I ever got here at all. I was coming with Eleanor Stone, and we'd arranged the whole thing, and we were to meet at the corner of Sink Street. I made it perfectly plain because I knew what she was like, and if I told her once, I told her 100 times I would not meet her outside that dreadful Marjorie Banks woman's house. Not after the way that she treated me. No. That was one of the most dreadful things that happened to me. I've been dying to tell you because I felt sure you'd tell me I acted rightly. No, wait a minute, dear. Till I've told you I tried living with her. when I first came here, and it was all fixed up. She was to do the cooking, I was to look after the house, and I did think I was going to be comfortable after all I'd been through. But she turned out to be so changed, so absolutely selfish, and not a particle of sympathy for anyone but herself. And as I once said to her, I do think I'm entitled to a little consideration because you at least lived out your time, but I oughtn't to have been here for years and years yet. But of course, I'm forgetting you don't know. I was murdered, simply murdered, dear. That man should never have operated. I ought to be alive today, and they simply starved me in that dreadful nursing home, and no one ever came near me, and... The shrill, monotonous whine died away as the speaker, still accompanied by the bright patients at her side, moved out of hearing. "What troubles ye, son?" asked my teacher. "I am troubled, sir," said I, "'cause that unhappy creature doesn't seem to me to be the sort of soul that ought to be even in danger of damnation. She isn't wicked. She's only a silly, garrulous old woman who has got into a habit of grumbling, and one feels that a little kindness and rest and change would put her all right. That is what she once was. That is maybe what she still is. If so, she certainly will be cured. But the whole question is whether she is now a grumbler." I should have thought that there was no doubt about that. "Aye, but ye misunderstand me. The question is whether she is a grumbler or only a grumble. If there is a real woman, even the least trace of one still there inside the grumbling, it can be brought to life again. If there's one wee spark under all those ashes, we'll blow it till the whole pile is red and clear. But if there's nothing but ashes, we'll not go on blowing them in our own eyes forever. They must be swept up." But how can there be a grumble without a grumbler? The whole difficulty of understanding hell is that the thing to be understood is so nearly nothing. But you'll have had experiences. It begins with a grumbling mood, and yourself still distinct from it, perhaps criticizing it even. And yourself in a dark hour may will that mood, even embrace it. Ye can repent, ye can come out of it again. But there may come a day when you do that no longer. Then there will be no you left to criticize the mood, nor even to enjoy it, but just the grumble itself going on forever like a machine. But come, ye are here to watch and listen. Lean on my arm and we will go for a little walk." I obeyed. To lean on the arm of someone older than myself was an experience that carried me back to childhood, and with this support I found the going tolerable, so much so, indeed, that I flattered myself my feet were already growing more solid, until a glance at the poor transparent shapes convinced me that I owed all of this ease to the strong arm of my teacher. Perhaps it was because of his presence that my other senses also appeared to be quickened. I noticed scents in the air which had hitherto escaped me, and the country put on new beauties. There was water everywhere and tiny flowers quivering in the early breeze. Far off in the woods we saw the deer glancing past, and once a sleek panther came purring to my companion's side. We also saw many of the ghosts. I think the most pitiable was a female ghost. Her trouble was the very opposite of that which afflicted the other, the lady frightened by the unicorns. This one seemed quite unaware of her phantasmal appearance. More than one of the solid people tried to talk to her, and at first I was quite at a loss to understand her behavior toward them. She appeared to be contorting her all but invisible face and writhing her smoke-like body in a quite meaningless fashion. At last I came to the conclusion, incredible as it seemed, that she supposed herself still capable of attracting them, and was trying to do so. She was a thing that had become incapable of conceiving conversation save as a means to an end. To that end, if a corpse, already liquid with decay, had arisen from the coffin, smeared its gums with lipstick, and attempted a flirtation, the result could not have been more appalling. In the end she muttered, "Stupid creatures," and turned back to the bus. This put me in mind to ask my teacher what he thought of the affair with the unicorns. "It will maybe have succeeded," he said. "You will have divined that he meant to frighten her. Not that fear itself could make her less of a ghost, but if it took her mind a moment off herself, there might in that moment be a chance. I have seen them saved so." We met several ghosts that had come so near to heaven only in order to tell the celestials about hell. Indeed, this is one of the commonest types. Others, who had perhaps been, like myself, teachers of some kind, actually wanted to give lectures about it. They brought fat notebooks full of statistics and maps, and one of them a magic lantern. Some wanted to tell anecdotes of the notorious sinners of all ages whom they had met below, but the most part seemed to think that the mere fact of having contrived for themselves so much misery had given them a kind of superiority. "You have led a sheltered life," they'd bawl. "You don't know the seamy side. We'll tell you. We'll give you some hard facts." As if to tinge heaven with infernal images and colors had been the only purpose for which they had come. All alike, so far as I could judge from my own exploration of the lower world, were wholly unreliable, and all equally innocuous about the country in which they had arrived. They repelled every attempt to teach them, and when they found that nobody would listen to them, they went back one by one to the bus. This curious wish to describe hell turned out, however, to be only the mildest form of a desire very common among the ghosts, the desire to extend hell, to bring it bodily, if they could, into heaven. There were tub-thumping ghosts who in thin bat-like voices urged the blessed spirits to shake off their fetters, to escape from their imprisonment in happiness, to tear down the mountains with their hands, to seize heaven for their own. Hell offered her cooperation. There were planning ghosts who implored them to dam the river, cut down the trees, kill the animals, build a mountain railway, smooth out the horrible grass and moss and heather with asphalt. There were materialistic ghosts who informed the immortals that they were deluded. There was no life after death, and this whole country was a hallucination. There were ghosts, plain and simple, mere bogies, fully conscious of their own decay, who had accepted the traditional role of the specter and seemed to hope that they could frighten someone. I had no idea that this desire was possible, but my teacher reminded me that the pleasure of frightening is by no means unknown on earth, and also of Tacitus' saying, "They terrify lest they should fear." When the debris of a decayed human soul finds itself crumbled into ghosthood and realizes, I myself am now that which all humanity has feared. I am just that cold churchyard shadow, that horrible thing which cannot be, and yet somehow is. Then to terrify others appears to it an escape from the doom of being a ghost, yet still fearing ghosts, fearing even the ghost it is. For to be afraid of oneself is the last horror. But beyond all these, I saw other grotesque phantoms in which hardly a trace of the human form remained. Monsters who had faced the journey to the bus stop, perhaps for them it was thousands of miles, and come up to the country of the shadow of life and limped far into it over the torturing grass, only to spit and gibber out in one ecstasy of hatred, their envy and what is harder to understand, their contempt of joy. The voyage seemed to them a small price to pay, if once, only once, within sight of that eternal dawn, they could tell the prigs, the toffs, the sanctimonious humbugs, the snobs, the haves, what they thought of them. "How do they come to be here at all?" I asked my teacher. "I have seen that kind converted," said he, "when those ye would think less deeply damned have gone back. Those that hate goodness are sometimes nearer than those that know nothing at all about it and think they have it already." "Who is't now?" said my teacher suddenly. We were standing close to some bushes, and beyond them I saw one of the solid people and a ghost who had apparently just that moment met. The outlines of the ghost looked vaguely familiar, but I soon realized that what I had seen on Earth was not the man himself, but photographs of him in the papers. He had been a famous artist. "God," said the ghost, glancing round the landscape. "God what?" asked the spirit. "What do you mean, God what?" asked the ghost. "In our grammar, God is a noun." "Ha, I see. I only meant by gum, or something of the sort. I meant, well, all this. It's, I should like to paint this." "I shouldn't bother about that just at present, if I were you. Look here. Isn't one going to be allowed to go on painting here?" "Looking comes first." "But I've had my look. I've seen just what I want to do. God, I wish I thought to bring my things with me." The spirit shook his head, scattering light from his hair as he did so. "That sort of thing's no good here," he said. "What do you mean?" said the ghost. "When you painted on Earth, at least in your earlier days, it was because you caught glimpses of heaven in the earthly landscape. The success of your painting was that it enabled others to see those glimpses too. But here, You are having the thing itself. It is far from here that all of those messages come. There is no good telling us about this country now, for we see it already. In fact, we see it even better than you do. Then there's never going to be any point in painting here? I don't say that. When you've grown into a person, it's all right, we all had to do it. Then there'll be some things which you'll see better than anyone else. One of the things you'll want to do will be to tell us about them. But not yet. At present, your business is just to see. Come and see. He is endless. Come and feed. There was a little pause. That will be delightful, said the ghost presently in a rather dull voice. Come then, said the spirit, offering it his arm. How soon do you think I could begin painting? It asked. The spirit broke into laughter. Don't you see? You'll never paint at all if that's what you're thinking about, he said. What do you mean? Asked the ghost. Why, if you are interested in the country only for the sake of painting it, you'll never learn to see the country. But that's just how a real artist is interested in the country. No, you're forgetting, said the spirit. That was not how you began. Light itself was your first love. You loved paint only as a means of telling about light. Oh, that's ages ago, said the ghost. One grows out of that. Of course you haven't seen my later works. One becomes more and more interested in paint for its own sake. One does indeed. I also have had to recover from that. It was all a snare. Ink and catgut and paint were necessary down there, but they are also dangerous stimulants. Every poet and musician and artist, but for grace, is drawn away from love of the thing he tells to love of the telling, till deep in deep, deep hell, they cannot be interested in God at all, but only in what they say about him. For it doesn't stop at being interested in paint, you know. They sink lower, become interested in their own personalities, and then in nothing but their own reputations. I don't think I'm much troubled in that way, said the ghost stiffly. That's excellent, said the spirit. Not many of us had quite got over it when we first arrived, but if there's any of that inflammation left, it will be cured when you come to the fountain. What fountain's that? It is up there in the mountains, said the spirit, very cold and clear, between two green hills, a little like Lethe. When you have drunk out of it, you forget forever all proprietorship in your own works. You enjoy them just as if they were someone else's, without pride and without modesty. That'll be grand, said the ghost without enthusiasm. Well, come, said the spirit, and for a few paces he supported the hobbling shadow forward to the east. Of course, said the ghost as if speaking to itself, there'll always be interesting people to meet. Everyone will be interesting. Oh, yes, to be sure, I was thinking of people in our own line, like, shall I meet Claude, or Cézanne, or... Sooner or later, if they're here. But don't you know? Well, of course not. I've only been here a few years. All the chances are against my having run across them. There are a good many of us, you know. But surely in the case of distinguished people, you'd hear. But they aren't distinguished, no more than anyone else. Don't you understand? The glory flows into everyone. And back from everyone, like light and mirrors, but the light's the thing. Do you mean there are no famous men? They are all famous. They are all known, remembered, recognized by the only mind that can give a perfect judgment. Of course, in that sense, said the ghost. Don't stop, said the spirit, making to lead him still forward. One must be content with one's reputation among posterity, then, said the ghost. My friend, said the spirit, don't you know? Know what? That you and I are already completely forgotten on the earth. Huh? What's that? Exclaimed the ghost, disengaging its arm. Do you mean those damned neo-regionalists have won after all? Lord love you, yes, said the spirit, once more shaking and shining with laughter. You couldn't get £5 for any picture of mine, or even of yours in Europe or America today. We're dead out of fashion. I must be off at once, said the ghost. Let me go. Damn it all, one has one's duty to the future of art. I must go back to my friends. I must write an article. There must be a manifesto. We must start a periodical. We must have publicity. Let me go. This is beyond a joke. And without listening to the spirit's reply, the specter vanished. That was the end of chapter 9. I'm gonna finish there for the night, because even though I could read the rest of it, there's really not that much even left to read. But it's just such a good book. I'm really enjoying it, and I hope you are too. Bye.